Hello, hello. Welcome in. So good to see faces. If you can't turn your video on, that's fine too. There's no worries. I want this to be accessible. I want you to be comfortable. If you're getting some steps in, whatever that might look like for you. Um, I am going to go ahead and record this. There'll be some time at the end for some Q&A. So if you do have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat as we get going. But we'll also have an opportunity at the end where you can take your video off or unmute yourself and you can ask questions then too. So I do have notes for this just because I didn't want to miss anything. So if you see me kind of reading and scanning, just know that I'm here. But I just want to make sure that I don't miss anything as we get going. And so as we get started, I would love for you to just kind of settle into your space. So, wherever you're at, if it's accessible for you, just find a cozy spot and maybe placing a hand on your heart. You can close your eyes if it feels accessible for you. And I just want you to tune into your breath real quick. And so, as you inhale, filling your belly with lots of air, pausing at the top and exhaling everything out. And just allowing your shoulders to settle down. One more big inhale. And exhaling everything out. Just allowing yourself to be here in this space. You can open your eyes, but I just want you to feel grounded where you are right here, and take what's here for you, right? It's always my goal that you take what you need and leave what you don't. And so today is all about the self-sabotage loop that we so often get stuck in. And I really want you to anchor into the belief that today we're not talking about fixing you, right? It's not about forcing more discipline. And it's definitely not about being harder on yourself. I know, especially as women, as high achieving women, as perfectionists, we can tend to get into that overwhelm of, well, I just need to try harder. And it's actually not about that at all. And so, what it is about is finally understanding at a nervous system level why self sabotage shows up and why emotional eating can feel so automatic, and also why you can know exactly what to do, right? The meal plan, the macros, the routine, all of the things, and you still find yourself not doing it. And so by the end of our time together today, it's my hope that something will feel different for you. And again, not because you tried harder, but because you're understanding yourself differently. And so I just want to kind of paint the picture and let me know in the comments if you can relate to any of these. But if you've ever found yourself standing in the kitchen, maybe late at night after you put the kids to bed, finally feeling like you have a moment to yourself, or maybe you're on the couch scrolling your phone while you're having a snack and you don't even really realize what you're eating, or you open the bag and you realize that the bag is gone after 5 minutes and you're like, oh, did I really just eat all of that? Or if you've ever told yourself like, I'll be better tomorrow, more times than you can count, right? I'll start over on Monday. Or if you've ever felt frustrated that you can show up for everybody else beautifully, but that you're never consistent for yourself. If any of those sound familiar, I just want you to know that you're in the right place and nothing about you is broken. You don't need more willpower. It's an understanding. And yes, I used to hide in the pantry to eat a few Oreos. Oh my gosh. Yes, for me, it was chocolate chips, right? Like anybody who has coached with me knows that chocolate chips are actually my nemesis. And so it is. It's like these things that we think are, our coping mechanisms that we think something's wrong with us, when in reality, it's just our nervous system asking for a little bit of regulation. And so I wanted to start with a moment from my own journey because I was once exactly where you are. And sometimes it feels embarrassing to even admit, but I used to be the one who was emotionally eating in secret. And not because I was hungry, but because it was really like the only moment all day where I could finally exhale. As a former teacher in fifth grade, and then after having my two girls, it was like, oh my gosh, somebody always needed something from me, right? And so it was handfuls of chocolate chips straight from the cupboard. It was stopping by Target or the grocery store in between school and picking up my girls to grab a donut and eat it in my car. It was standing up while I was eating, snacking while I was making dinners. It was eating too fast. And sometimes it was exactly what I just said of opening up the bag, starting to munch, not realizing the bag's gone. And I'd always tell myself, like, oh, you'll be better tomorrow, or you'll just do better when you have a different plan. And then tomorrow would come, and I'd feel motivated, and I'd declare to my husband, today's the day. And I'd start out hopeful. And then 2 or 3 o'clock would hit, 4 o'clock, that in between time of when I left school before I would pick up the girls. And I'd find myself in the same pattern. Or it was a really crappy night of sleep when my girls were younger. Or maybe it was a really hard day in the classroom, some big behaviors. Maybe it was a full calendar, or one of my girls came home and had a hard day. And then suddenly all of my good intentions would just collapse, right? And I remember thinking to myself, why can't I just follow through? Like, why don't I do the things that I say I'm going to do? And what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? I had the plans, I had the macros, I had the coaches. My goodness, I had the routines, I had the logic, I had all of the information, but yet I was living in this constant state of overwhelm. I was constantly rushing. I was trying to prove myself, giving and giving and giving to everybody else, trying to hold it all together. I talk a lot about the invisible backpack, right? That invisible load that we all carry, especially as women. And the moment that everything shifted was when I realized something that changed all of it for me. And it wasn't that the food needed fixing, right? It wasn't a new plan. It was really that it was my nervous system. It was my ego. It was my identity. And the harshest truth of it all, and again, one that is hard for me to admit, was that I really just didn't trust myself anymore because I spent day in and day out saying I was going to do something, getting overwhelmed, and then falling apart. And so when I stopped chasing the perfect plan or believing that someone else out there in the universe had the answers that I needed, that's when I started rebuilding the self-trust. And that's when everything changed. And it wasn't overnight, it wasn't this big aha moment, right? But it was moment by moment where in those moments that I used to choose the food, the chocolate chips, I was able to pause and I was able to recognize the moment, ground in what do I actually need, and make a different choice. Not easy, but over time, I've been able to shift that for myself. And so I want to move into why self-sabotage happens. And this is again, like, this is where it all will hopefully land and make sense for you. Because what so often happens is we don't know what's going on. We just think it's a discipline problem. I need to be more disciplined. I need to have more willpower. But here's the truth that nobody tells you is that self-sabotage, it isn't a flaw. It's not a lack of discipline. And it's not you being weak, right? Self-sabotage is actually a protection pattern because what's ending up happening is your ego has one job, and that is to keep you safe. Not to keep you happy, not fulfilled, but safe. And safe from discomfort, safe from overwhelm, safe from any like emotional exposure or like embarrassment, and sometimes even safe from success. Like our ego is the one that's holding us back. And I talk about this a lot of like when we're holding that edge of becoming the next version of ourselves, our ego tries to pull us back because your ego only operates off of what it already knows, past experiences, past evidence. And so if you're trying to get to this new place, right? Lose 50 pounds, start a new workout program, run a half marathon, start a business. Your ego knows no different. So it's always going to pull you back. So we're standing on this edge where we're not quite where we want to be. And the ego steps in because it's trying to keep you safe, right? And so when you try to change anything, whether that's how you eat, maybe it's slowing down, oftentimes for women, it's setting boundaries, saying no, slowing down, prioritizing yourself, right? This is when your ego steps in and says things like, oh, you're too tired to deal with that right now. You've had a long day. You deserve this. It's just a little bit. It's just one bite. It's just one scoop. We'll just start over again on Monday. This isn't the season to focus on yourself. You've got other things. It's the holidays, right? And it shows up as the late night snacking, the skipping the workout, even though you wanted to go. Maybe it's abandoning the plan, skipping meal prep because you've got other things to do. And at the core, that's not self-destruction, right? It's actually protection using outdated tools. And at some point, those coping mechanisms have kept you safe, right? They've kept you um, safe in a situation that probably didn't feel too great, often stemming back into childhood. So a lot of my clients, when they first come in, I ask them about their childhood. Tell me about eating in your house as a child. Tell me about any rules you had around food. Tell me how your childhood was. Because a lot of our coping strategies, often around food, stem from our childhood. And once you understand that your ego is really just trying to protect you, everything stops feeling so personal, right? We stop making it a big deal or about ourselves. And so how is this landing? Does this sound, can you relate to any of these things? Does this sound like you? Have you had experiences like that? Have you had those thoughts before? Yeah, it's again, you're not alone. And so I want to move into the four stages of the ego because this is really the part that changes everything. And I was just having a conversation with one of my clients today where we're literally working on this right now is just stage one and stage two. And so most women live in stage one of their ego their entire lives without even realizing it. And so today you're going to learn how to move through all four. And again, when I was on my coaching call this morning, one of the things that my client said is, I feel like this is just who I am when we were talking about her ego. Because stage one of the ego is where your ego drives all of your decisions. Think about it as just like autopilot, oftentimes like victim mentality. You're busy, you're tired, you're overstimulated. You often feel like things are just happening to you instead of like you're making those decisions. And it can look like snacking while standing at the counter. It can look like eating in your car, scrolling while you eat, building that distraction, right? Starting strong and then starting over on Mondays. And again, this isn't failure. It's just when the ego is running the show. And so oftentimes, again, we're not even really aware of it because this just feels like who we are. Exactly what my client said this morning. This just feels like who I am, and I don't know how to get out of it. And so then we move into stage two, which is the awareness of the ego. So starting to recognize when the ego is showing up. And the other piece that can be helpful is because for a long time, I didn't know what my ego sounded like, right? We often think of our ego as being like this really like rude, loud, like bully in our brain. And my ego, I named her, her name's Susan. She's not really loud. She's not really bossy. She's just always there. She's very incessant. I always think of like a hamster wheel. She's just constantly going. And so it took me a while to build awareness around her. And often, Mel Robbins has a book called The Let Them Theory. And in there, she talks about how all of us at our core are really just like an 8-year-old who is having temper tantrums, right? And so when we think of it like that, it's like, oh my gosh, yeah, it's like it's so silly. Some of the thoughts that we have, and my client said this too, is like, my behavior is almost childish. And it's like, well, yeah, because it's that 8-year-old self, it's that childlike version of yourself that is like wanting something and it's not getting its way. So it's having a temper tantrum. And so we give it what it wants. Right. And so if you're a parent, you can probably identify with this with your own kids. And so it's like the more that we can build awareness around this. And so this is where stage two comes in of like awareness around the ego. And so this sounds like and looks like when those thoughts pop up, right? Of like, oh, you're never going to be able to do that. No, that's actually your ego, right? Like that's not your true self. And so thinking of it like your little me of like almost having like on your shoulder, right? People often talk about like a devil and an angel. And so when we think of that little voice of like, you're never going to be able to do that. You always fail. Why are you going to even try? Like that's your ego. And so when you have those thoughts where it's like, oh my gosh, this isn't even me. Like, where did that come from? This is where you get to remind yourself that this isn't me. This is a protective part of me. This is my ego. I'm overwhelmed. I'm feeling overwhelmed. And so no wonder I want food, right? It's almost like this talking yourself through the process. And so when you start to build the awareness around when those thoughts that are popping up are actually your ego, not your true self, this is where the awareness creates the space for you, right? And it gives you space to actually make a different choice versus the ones that you do on repeat because of your ego, if that makes sense. And so stage three, so stage one is your ego is driving the decisions. Stage two is building awareness of your ego. And then stage three is having compassion for your ego. And this is often a hard one because when we think of our ego, and if you think of like that temper tantrum, and even if you've had kids or Melissa, I know you were a teacher. And so it's like you think of those kids, and when they're having these temper tantrums, like your automatic response typically is like you want to get mad and like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? Um, and that's the complete opposite of what we want to do for our ego, right? Because our ego is really asking for us to be compassionate because it's a part of us that didn't get what it needed when we were a younger version of ourself. And so this is where the shame starts to dissolve. A lot of women who come into my space are filled with a lot of shame and embarrassment and judgment on themselves around the choices that they've made before. A, because they think they're the only ones who have done it, which I remind them that they are not. But B, because they feel like, well, I shouldn't do that, right? But when we can have compassion for ourselves, for that part of ourselves, the ego, who is really trying to just keep us safe, when you can stop asking, like, what's wrong with me, right? As if something's wrong, you get to start saying, of course you wanted comfort. Like, you've been carrying so much. And that's the same thing with my client this morning. She was getting all of the things ready for Christmas, and she didn't get her meal prep ready. And so then she went down the spiral of feeling a whole lot of shame. And then she was self-sabotaging with sugar. And it's like, that's the loop, right? And so if we can interrupt that pattern, that behavior pattern at the very beginning, instead of putting other people first or listening to your ego of like, oh, you got to make everybody else happy, you've got to do it for everybody else, and start with yourself, right? What was the learning lesson in that? And so it begins to soften and it helps to calm the nervous system, right? Because there's two different energies that come in when you are asking, what's wrong with me? I can't believe you did that, right? All of those negative Nancy languages, phrases that we have, that's an energy of shame and guilt. And I'm never going to be able to figure it out. Versus like, oh my gosh, like, of course, that made so much sense. Like, of course you wanted comfort. Of course you're feeling overwhelmed. Of course you reached for the sugar. Your body was needing some quick energy. Like, let's learn from this. There's two different energies. And so that's where, again, we always get to choose. And so the more that we can bring compassion into the equation, the more we can regulate our nervous system and help us into stage 4, which is the self-leadership portion. And so this is where we know our ego, right? We have the awareness, it's no longer driving decisions. We have the awareness of when the ego is coming. We have the self-compassion, and then we get to lead ourselves and make a different decision. And so, stage 4, the self-leadership, is where you still feel that urge, but you get to respond differently. You don't abandon yourself. And this isn't about perfection, right? And some days it's going to feel easier than others. You're not always going to choose self-leadership, right? But it's about choosing it more often than not. And it's about choosing the aligned action, especially when the ego is really loud. And so oftentimes I'll have clients say one of the benefits of meal prepping, right? We spend the time meal prepping, and that can look different for everybody, whether it's 10 minutes or 2 hours, but you meal prep so that then on the Wednesday night after a long day and you want to eat a bowl of cereal for dinner, you have a meal prepped for yourself. And so even when you don't feel like eating that meal, it's there and it's probably even easier to make than a bowl of cereal. And so you start to take the aligned action, you make the healthy choice, the easy choice, and you start to show up because that's the aligned action. And you are leading yourself even when your ego is telling you, "Ugh, I really want that bowl of cereal." And so this is where the woman that you want to be, I often talk about like visualizing your future self 6 months from now, a year from now. Who is she? How does she show up? How does she speak to herself? What behaviors does she do? How does she show up? And so this is where you get to be that woman 6 months from now. You get to be her now. You get to start taking the action now that's going to actually get you to that future version of yourself because she finally feels safe to do so because she knows that it's her ego. She knows that she needs to give some compassion and she knows that she can lead herself even when her ego is telling her something different. And after practice, this gets a little bit easier. Your ego quiets down a little bit more. She'll never go away. Sweet Susan, she's always there. But she's just not as loud. And I have practiced what it looks like to have her in my ear and still be able to go the other way. And that's when you start building your self-trust moment by moment. And again, they're not in these big, grandiose moments. It's not going to shift or change overnight, but it's in these small micro moments when you get to choose, like you have these choice points, right? And it's not all or nothing. It's not this way or that way. Maybe it's this way and then that way, right? And so, like I told my client this morning, it's not that you can't or that you have to choose one or the other. It's you get to choose meal prep first and then you get to decorate versus the decorate taking up all of the time and then you just skip the meal prep. So, um, that is any questions on the 4 stages of the ego. So we have ego. Stage 1 is the ego is driving the decisions. Stage 2 is the awareness. So building awareness around when those thoughts popping up are actually the ego. Stage three is the self-compassion, right? What does my or what do I actually need in this moment? And then stage four is the self-leadership, where your ego can be talking and you still get to choose a different decision, a different choice. Any questions? Okay. And so one thing that I want you to be able to walk away with is I want to give you something tangible that you can use today. And I use this often with my clients is it's the power of the pause. And so often what ends up happening is we lose our self-trust when we say we're going to do something and we don't do it. So for example, you can get up in the morning, you can list out your plan for the day. I'm going to eat this, I'm going to walk at this time, I'm going to go to the gym at this time, I'm going to work from here to here. And then it gets to be lunchtime and you don't follow through with what you said you were going to eat. And each time that happens, your self-doubt builds and your self-trust goes down. And so what I like to help you do is build in that pause for yourself. And so this is kind of like a three-part pause. And so the first thing is you are going to name it. So when you have that trigger, right, we have this habit loop of there's the trigger, there's the behavior, and there's the reward. And so when that trigger comes up, you're going to name what's happening, right? So like, oh my gosh, I am feeling so overwhelmed. I just had a really uncomfortable conversation and I want to go bury myself in some chocolate chips. So first, again, this is just my ego trying to protect me, right? Because I'm feeling overwhelmed. I don't want to sit with these emotions. The second step is to take a few deep breaths, right? Because often what ends up happening is when we have that trigger, our nervous system is in dysregulation. And so we're making decisions based off of our emotions, not necessarily logic. And so by step number two, breathing a few times, you're allowing your body to get back into regulation, feeling grounded, allowing that logical brain to catch up. And then the third step is to lead yourself, to make an intentional choice. And so asking yourself, okay, what would actually support me right now? Because it's not the chocolate chips. Sometimes, but most often it's not the chocolate chips, right? And so maybe it's a drink of water. Maybe it's running up and down the stairs a few times. Maybe it's stepping outside for a breath of fresh air. But my body doesn't actually need the chocolate chips. And so the power of the pause is when you notice those triggers coming up. And if you know that there's a pattern, right? Like often for me, it's dinner time. Like the girls get home, Nolan gets home from work, everybody's asking what's for dinner, and I'm feeling overloaded. And so my immediate response is to like, I want to snack a little bit. And so I know that now. And so I either allow myself baby carrots or I get a spindrift. And those I just know are for me. And so it's like when you know that those triggers are coming up, allow yourself to recognize that, taking a few deep breaths, allowing that pause, and then asking, leading yourself, like, what do I actually need right now? And choosing that different direction, that different choice. And again, it's not always going to be easy. It's going to feel uncomfortable because you're trying to change a pattern or a behavior that you have done for a very long time. And so again, not forever. Like, what do you need in that moment? It's not forever. It's just in that moment. What do you need to get yourself to where you want to go? And often it's just getting back into regulation so that you're not reaching for the food, the phone, the TV, the wine, the alcohol, any of those things. So, that's a quick takeaway that hopefully you can bring into your everyday. And again, it's just called the power of the pause. And so naming it when that ego is popping up, right? Regulating yourself through a breath. I always like to put a hand on my chest, like a hand on my heart and a hand on my belly to just kind of like that pressure. I don't know if you remember, if you're a mama, when you had the little ones and it was like that little bit of pressure, there's a reason there's weighted blankets out there, but it just like is a sign to your nervous system to like, okay, we're safe. And then what does my body actually need right now? What would support me in moving forward? So that is stage of egos and whew, stage of egos and a quick takeaway for you, the power of the pause. And so from all of this, I am so excited to share that I created an 8-week program called the Becoming Her Foundations, because again, awareness without support can feel really lonely, right? Like we can know all of the things, we can become aware of it, but we can fall off really quickly. And again, this is like what I see with my clients, where even when we have weekly calls, it's like, oh, I did so well for like the 2 days after our call, and then I just kind of fell off. And it's so normal, right? Because when we've lived that life, doing the same thing over and over and over again, it can be hard to disrupt that pattern. And so this work, this 8-week course is for the woman who is driven and curious and is ready to stop doing the work alone. And she's ready to invest her time and energy and money, into herself, because at the end of the day, that is always my goal as a coach. I do not believe that my job as a coach is to tell you what to do. My job is to lead you back home to yourself, because I truly believe that you have all of the answers you need. Sometimes it's just getting your body the support and the tools to be able to access those answers. And so this is an 8-week course that is focused on building awareness and regulation, interrupting those patterns, and then rewiring the thought processes behind them, going into self-trust and kind of that food freedom, and then finishing out with identity and that self-leadership. Because at the end of the day, this is all about who do we identify as. And for a lot of women, we don't take the time to actually think about who are we? Like, who do we identify as? We've allowed the world to kind of tell us what we are or who we are. And so it's really an opportunity for you to step in and take control of the life that you want for yourself. And so you'll move away from, I don't know why I keep sabotaging, into finally understanding the patterns that you have. You'll finally know what to do in the moment when you have those urges to rush to the pantry for the cookies. You'll finally start to lead yourself and start to trust yourself again. Because at the core, this is the transformation that truly lasts. And through the work that I've done with many women who come in wanting to lose weight, what I find is it has nothing to do with the food and the movement. It's all about the mindset and the self-sabotage and who they identify with, the beliefs that they have about themselves, and the conditioning that they've held throughout their entire lives. And so this is kind of that root cause approach of, okay, let's get to the bottom of this, of why you keep repeating the same things over and over and over again. And so what I found is the women who find success in our work together are the women who know that this is a long game, right? Whether you have 10 pounds to lose or 100 pounds to lose, it's not about the number on the scale. It's about your relationship with yourself and coming at it from a place of a grounded nervous system so that you can show up in a way that supports who you want to be. And so if this work feels like a deep breath for you, my first cohort of this is going to be starting in January. And so I will be opening things up this Friday, and I would love nothing more to start the conversation if that feels doable for you, or if that feels like this is something that you need. So I am going to stop recording real quick so that we can do question and answer if we want.